to other Rebecca.
My name is Deborah.
Hey guys, it's Cameron Review of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 4, Episode 12, I Need a Break, and holy shit, I mean, once again, this was a really big episode, much bigger than I was expecting. I essentially thought that coming off the heels of last week that this would be more of like a palate cleanser, kind of a more fun episode, and it was anything but that, but still a damn good episode overall. I mean, this show is firing on all cylinders in so many amazing ways, and this episode very much does show that, but I really do want to get into it. So, while last week's episode focused mainly, of course, on Nathaniel, this one does focus more on Rebecca, but it also fixes one of the only complaints I've had with this season, which honestly there hasn't really been too many, especially as of late. They've been doing so many things right. The one lingering flaw I have had with this season is I do not think that the Rebecca and Paula friendship has felt as prominent as it has in other seasons. It's not like it hasn't been there, but it's felt more like Rebecca has been with Valencia or Heather, even Daryl, and then Paula's more on the sidelines. This episode very much changed that, and that's something I was very happy to see because this episode focused really only on Rebecca and Paula. It still utilized most of the ensemble quite well, but it really was Rebecca and Paula's episode with two stories that were seemingly very unconnected, which I really do want to dive into Rebecca here, because like I said, I really thought going into this episode was going to be more of a fun episode. We start things off and her and Greg, we realized that the two of them have been hanging out a lot lately, pretty much every second of the day. And you knew from the second he said that something is going to go wrong. Something is going to go haywire here. There's no way he just casually drop that line. We get hints throughout this episode that Rebecca is really not in as good as a place as she seemed, and that's something I really have to commend the writers on, is that they've really done a great job at convincing us that Rebecca is legitimately okay. That Rebecca is someone that is, she's kind of starting to get over her borderline. She's starting to control it more. And while that may be the case, she's definitely not completely over it. There are definitely still signs, and I like that this episode did show that. For a while now, I've been trying to figure out, like, what else are they really going to do with Rebecca? It feels like she's kind of running out of storylines, and once again, this episode very much showed that is not the case, because basically her and Greg, they decide to finally go to Raging Waters, which we have heard about for a multitude of episodes now, and that definitely did not disappoint. I loved seeing these two at Raging Waters, but the second they get there, you can tell that Greg is really not that into this. He's not necessarily, bored or anything, but he does not have that same, fun and, that same sort of whimsical feeling that Rebecca gets when she goes there. And you can tell that Rebecca is a little bit disappointed. This is something she's wanted to do for a while, and she thought that her and Greg would have a good time, and clearly they aren't. And I really liked Skyler Astin's acting in this episode, I must say, because I think he did a really good job at portraying this in a very natural way. He wasn't coming across too mean, but he also wasn't coming across too nice either. It was a very good happy medium. He cares about Rebecca, so he's willing to wait it out, and at points he even decides to go on some rides with her, even when actively telling her that he doesn't enjoy doing that. He actually decides to go on one of them, but at the same time, he does not really enjoy what he's doing, and you can see he's trying to hide as best he can, but there's only so long that he can try to stick it out, and I think he played that very well here. But like I said, we are told very early on this episode that in terms of Rebecca's borderline, things have not been going as well as it seems. She has not really been attending group therapy. She hasn't been visiting Dr. Shin, which I like that they addressed this. Dr. Shin, we haven't seen him since, like, the back half of season 3, so it was cool that they brought him up again. We realized that Rebecca just has not really been going to him, and it seems like she's kind of been ignoring her borderline, and through a visit with Dr. Akopian, she feels this is very much a step back, and this really gets us to realize, holy shit, Rebecca actually isn't totally okay. And I think this was really good to see, actually. A lot of shows, they would try to show our character move past it. They would try to show that she is starting to, become more in check with it. And while she is in check with it, there are still those moments where she is going to backslide, and we very much see that here when she very rudely tells Greg basically to just fuck off, to leave her alone. He tries to tell her that he can tell she's upset. He wants her to try to, go back to group therapy because these are things that she needs. And that's something I really did like about this episode, that every single individual that Rebecca is, contacts in this episode, they all seem to have that same concern for her. And it's a very good way of showing that mental illness. It's a very good way that even, them, them, trying to help Rebecca, they're not at all belittling the work she's done. That's not at all what they're doing, but they want her to continue what she's doing. And I think that's very well shown here. It's all about her wanting to take action, but she just keeps kind of ignoring it, and she ends up blowing off Greg. She goes on this crazy, like, drug and alcohol binge, and it just gets absolutely insane. And it gets to the point where she actually ends up almost seducing Nathaniel, and the way that whole interaction was done, I thought was fantastic. I love that he genuinely told her to leave, and that he didn't want to, do anything sexual with her. It really does show how much his character has progressed from then till now, and it shows that those niceties that Nathaniel has kind of been feigning, they've very much become a part of him, and you can see that he is very much turned around as an individual. And I've really liked the growth that they've been showing with Nathaniel, and while he wasn't really that big in this episode, he didn't really play that big of a role, again, it's showing the development that he has. It's showing that he is genuinely, trying to get over her. He is genuinely, his apology was very genuine in the last episode. He does want her to move on. He does want her to be happy with Greg, and he doesn't want him to get in the way of doing that. And I really did like seeing that overall. I thought that was a really, really great moment. It's a small moment, but it's one that I really did love a lot. And, she ends up going back to Josh, and that whole sequence between her and Josh, it's really well done, because I was really worried that the show was going to try to do something where Rebecca maybe starts to have feelings for him again, but thankfully they did not do that. Instead, Josh tells her, no, we can't do this. We're roommates, and there's no way that I'm going to, do anything sexual with you. It's just going to make things awkward. And he actually rejects her advances, which was really great to see. Again, it just shows how much these characters have evolved from then till now, and showing that they really are serious in Rebecca getting that help. And I love that she realizes in that moment that she needs to do something about it. She can't just keep ignoring it. And what does she decide to do? She finally goes back to Dr. Shin, and I loved everything about this scene where she's just, she is so determined to do something about this that she is willing to stay up all night on a park bench just to wait for his arrival. And, he eventually shows up, and I really did love the conversation that her and Dr. Shin have, where he basically tells her that even though it is great that she's been going to group therapy, there's only so much she can do for herself, and maybe she should start self-medicating. And this is something that Rebecca really doesn't want to do, but it's something that is going to help her. It's going to help her, keep her borderline in check, and it's going to help her, it's going to help her so she doesn't need to put as much work into it. And I like that he really is willing to help her here. I like that we got to see that whole scene between them. It shows that Rebecca is moving forward as a character. I like that, again, even though Rebecca did kind of fall off the deep end and she was starting to backslide, this is not season one Rebecca. This is someone who's far more aware of what's wrong with her and the things that she needs to work on. And I love the way things do end here, where she is actually medicating and she is actually looking more into the research. That way she knows how to genuinely help herself, and she wants to get better. And I think that was just a really great way to end things. And again, for people who actually have borderline personality disorder, I think this is a great episode for them to watch, because a lot of shows, again, they try to act as if the character is over it. If this was something that, was temporary, but when you have something like that and it is so prominent in your life, you don't always get over it. There are moments where you are going to have those outbursts. There are moments where they're just going to kind of come out of nowhere, and you need to find ways to help yourself. And I really love that message. I love that the show portrayed this in such a realistic way. It could have handled it in a way that was so haphazard and ridiculous, but it played it in a very nuanced way. And Not to say the rest of the show hasn't, but I was just very impressed with what they did here. I was not expecting them to focus as much on her borderline. I thought it was something that she was kind of past, but clearly she isn't. And I like that we got to see that here. I think it's just a really great way of showing that even if someone is aware of what they have and is aware of the things that might trigger them and might affect their disorder, they may not always take care of themselves, and that's something that they need to do. They need to know to take that initiative, and no one is really going to do that for them until they decide to do so, until they decide to let someone help them, until they decide to let them help themselves. And I think that was just a really great message overall. But with that being said, let's just get to Paula, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, for the first like 2 quarters of this episode, I thought this subplot was very unnecessary. I thought this is an episode where, Rebecca's going through backsliding, and it's something that she, it's a very prominent thing for her, and I felt like the entire episode should have been focused on that. Little did I know that Paula's storyline also perfectly applied to that same message that Rebecca was going through, because we see Paula, she's really overworking herself. She's got this project that she's working on, and she's constantly giving orders, but she just looks like shit throughout the entire episode. And I like that, again, her coworkers are very sympathetic about it. They tell her, no, you look terrible, you need to do something to help yourself. But again, Paul is someone who is such an overachiever and is so dedicated to what she does that she doesn't really take that advice. She just kind of ignores it and assumes that it's simply just early stages of menopause, and that's really all that's going on here. And again, that could be a really good storyline. It shows that she is growing up, and it moves her forward. And while the menopause is a big thing, things really do take a turn when it turns out she actually goes to the gynecologist, and we find out that not only is it early stage of menopause, but she also is actually going into cardiac arrest, and she's suffering a heart attack. And that moment, I lost it. I thought for a second, holy shit, there's no way that they're going to kill off Paula. I know that they wouldn't do it. I know it's pretty early into the season, but knowing that this is the final season, anything is possible. All these characters, any final season at this point, any character's life is on the line. They could do something that really does shake up the show in that way. This season has been relatively calmer compared to the others, so maybe this is the thing that really does shake things up. And thankfully, they did not do that. I'm glad they actually did not kill her here, because what they decide to do instead, again, really does apply to that message where we find out that Paula was just so focused on working that she just kind of dismissed something that she didn't think was that serious, but it turned out to be extremely serious. And again, it doesn't seem like something that a lot of people, that might not happen to some people, but it shows that, little symptoms here and there, we may not think a lot about them, but eventually they are going to turn to something serious. And similar to Rebecca with her borderline, Paula really needs to take care of herself. She needs to let herself relax. She needs to let herself take a break. You don't always need to be working. Even though Paula keeps saying, oh, I don't have time, I don't have time. Sometimes you need to give yourself time off. Sometimes you need a break. And that's something that Paula very much does need. The scene where, she is talking about how she needs to break from work. It's a relief, because you realize that she's just been so dedicated. I mean, between graduating law school and all the stuff she did there, and now all the stuff she's doing in Mountaintop, I mean, she is so overly stressed that it turned into something far more serious. And I like that Paula is realizing that she does really need to take a break there. And that final scene between her and Rebecca, where Rebecca's right there by her side, it just really reinforces their relationship. And like I said, I feel like their friendship has not been as front and center, and it should be, because say what you want about Josh, Nathaniel, and Greg, Rebecca and Paula are the true relationship on the show. They're the one that really does anchor this entire show. The bond that they have is really unbreakable in that sense, and I love the way things were done there. I'm very interested in seeing where this is going to go. I'm hoping this is not the beginning of the end for Paula, but again, that message that was in this episode was not one I was expecting, but it was one that was very appropriate for what was going on. It was very effective in that way. And I loved how they took something that seems so silly and made it something far more serious. It's something this show is able to do, weave comedy and drama in a way that other shows just simply aren't. And again, I like that the comedy does not undermine the drama, and same with the drama. It never undermines what's going on. It works very well with this story. It was shocking, but it wasn't done for shock value. It was done to show the message of the episode. It makes sense for the character, and I really love the direction they took here. It was definitely not where I was expecting the season to go, but considering that Paula has not had like a big storyline this season, especially Rebecca and Paula, this was definitely the right move, and I'm definitely interested in seeing where this is going to go moving forward. But as usual, just because this episode was really emotional, especially towards its latter half, that does not mean that there weren't a lot of funny moments here. There were definitely some great moments throughout this episode. A lot of them including Paula, actually. I liked very early on where she was talking with Mrs. Hernandez, and she brings up the idea of menopause, and Paula talks about how she still gets very heavy periods. Just the way she described it was hilarious. I love the way it was done. It was so Paula in that way. I really did love that. There was a lot of really fun stuff with Paula, like Scott reminding her of her sleep back in the 80s, which, apparently she hasn't had that good of a sleep ever, which, again, considering Paula's character, that's something that we genuinely do believe. However, the funniest moment for me with Paula is the end of the episode where she's talking to Rebecca about eating salad and how much she hates it. I mean, that was just great to see. I mean, as someone who is a salad lover, I really do get it for sure. I thought it was definitely a really funny moment, and I really did enjoy that a lot. Aside from Paula, though, there were still some really funny moments, like Rebecca walking in on Josh, watching the Great British Bake Off, and him just like marveling about it. That was hilarious. Um, I love the moment where Rebecca is very high and she keeps talking about like her love for Lilo and Stitch. It's one of those things where it's so mundane, but when you're high or drunk like that, you'll just anything you hear about it's just taken to the extreme, and you really did see that with her. I thought that was hilarious to watch, and Rachel Bloom really did sell it there. Funniest moment of the entire episode, though, had to be with Dr. Roth. I fucking love this, where Rebecca thinks she recognizes him, but it turns out to be his brother, and he's just very loud, and he's like, no, that's the other Dr. Roth. Again, it's one of those things where it's a small scene, but they did a lot with that actor, and you definitely got a lot out of him. There's a lot of really great cameos in this show, and that's definitely one of them that is very much going to stick with me. Such a hilarious moment, and it worked perfectly after such an emotional scene. It really did provide that sense of levity that I think we really did need, because we had that really emotional scene between Scott and Rebecca before, and I like that he came in there and gave us that sense of levity and that sense of hope that everything in the end will be okay. I thought there were some really hilarious moments, some of them probably not even describing, that were definitely, throughout this episode. In terms of music for this episode, this was definitely a very big one. There were a lot of songs here, a lot of them that I really did enjoy a lot. The three that were in here, though, I thought all were very well done. I Hate Everything But You, the song that Greg did. Skyler Astin absolutely killed it. I love that he got to a solo on the show. And again, it's very reminiscent of What'll It Be, especially the moment where Greg realizes he can't play the guitar. That's a great callback to that. But it's also a great song showing that Greg, while he has changed and he is in recovery, there are just certain things about himself that isn't going to change, and that is his detestment of basically everything. He's always going to feel that way, and that's not something that Rebecca is going to change, unfortunately. Again, he might be better, but it shows that he is still does have some of the same mannerisms, and I thought that was definitely really well done. Love the way that song was. I'm gonna be honest, I was not a huge fan of I'm Not Sad, You're Sad. I thought it was funny, but the song itself I thought was honestly kind of annoying. I wasn't really the biggest fan of it. It shows how damaged Rebecca still is, for sure, and it definitely is funny in the moment, but in terms of the songs we've gotten this season, this was definitely one of the weaker ones. However, that was very much saved by The Darkness, which is one of the best songs of this entire season. I mean, everything about this is so great. With Rebecca acting like the darkness is an ex that she needs to get rid of, another one that she has to deal with, literally labeling the darkness Tyler, and how Tyler wears guy liner and things like that. So many creative lines in that song, but again, it really is a great moment of Rebecca confronting her inner demons and trying to finally put a stop to them, and realizing that she needs to lessen some of those things that she has kind of put aside, and she needs to put those front and center and really needs to deal with it. And I think it was just a really great moment for her overall. This was a really great overall, this was just a really strong episode. It was far more darker than I was expecting, but it really did lean heavily into an aspect of mental illness that we just don't really see portrayed on TV. But again, it also has that great message of self-care, and something that a lot of people, probably try to ignore because they're Paula and they just are very hardworking, or they're Rebecca and they are just trying to ignore it and move on with their life, and it's only it is hurting them rather than helping. And I think that's just a really great message overall. Similar to the rest of the season, I don't know where we're headed from here on out, and I'm a little bit scared. I really am hoping this isn't the end for Paula. I'm hoping she's able to recover from this. But overall, I really did love this episode a lot. Between everything we got with Rebecca and Paula, it really did bring those two back into the limelight, which is really great to see. And again, it very much does seem like we are wrapping things up. There's only 6 episodes left, which is just insane to me. I can't believe we're getting closer and closer to the end of this show. But again, I mean, this show, like I've said before, it's firing on all cylinders. It's doing pretty much everything right, and I just am loving every single minute of it. This episode, while not as amazing, while not as masterful as last week's, it came pretty damn close, and definitely, I think, is a great examination of just how well this show is able to waffle between comedy and drama. But not just that, how it is able to how it's able to portray mental illness, and how it's able to bring about these certain issues that it does. It never does it in a preachy way. It feels very real. It feels very nuanced. It makes sense with these characters, and that alone is enough reason to love this show. It reminds me why this show is as impactful as it is, and for all those reasons and more, I'm definitely going to give this episode an A. But overall, guys, in my review this week's episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, let me know what you guys saw this episode overall. Love your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
I hate the feeling of the sun when it hits my skin.